Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mile High Sports today. I'm your host, Sean Drotar. Nate Lundy on my right. Terrific football weekend for the Denver Broncos. They get the win over the Colts. We'll get into that game a little bit as we go along with the program. Troy Renck of the Denver Post will join us as well. For the Broncos, there are games, Nate, in which in the NFL, you lose games that maybe you should have won. You win games that maybe you should have lost. And the truth of the matter is this might have been one of the latter. If Jonathan Taylor doesn't simply drop the football before crossing the goal line, having it bounce out of the end zone, and we had a touchback for the Broncos, it's 20-7 in the third quarter for the Colts in a game in which the Broncos, despite the fact they scored 31 points, didn't even get to 200 total yards. So had Taylor not done that, who knows where the Broncos are, but this is the way it goes. Like I said, sometimes you win ones you should have otherwise lost. They gave the Broncos a window, and they jumped through it.
Yeah, I do agree that was obviously a massive play with Jonathan Taylor just being dumb and dropping the football. But at the same time, I still believe that there's a little bit of swagger with this team. I'm not convinced that necessarily means they would have lost. But it obviously was a massive turning point in the game. And you know, it's one of those stupid things. It's like you think as a fan, whether you're in the stands, you're watching on television, you're watching highlights of another team that's not yours, that it should just be so obvious, right? I mean, that you just, because it happens, you know, a half a dozen times a year, it feels like. And when you see that, you feel like when you're someone, especially somebody the caliber of Jonathan Taylor, that don't you just in your mind go, all right, I'm just going to hold on to the ball. Like, no, this thing is glued to my hand like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And this ball is not going anywhere. Or that you create some sort of rule inside your own head that you are not going to do anything with the football until you hit the back line of the end zone, just to be safe. It's like when you see kickoffs, even when it's a touchback, you see those players on special teams that run all the way to the goal line anyway, and they just go ahead and play it out. It just seems to me like receivers and running backs would learn to do that. Jonathan Taylor screwed up. Did he cost his team the game? Like I said, I'm not 100% convinced that that's the case, but he certainly changed the momentum. Because if you think about the fact everything on that was set up by the interception, it should have been a Colts touchdown, which would have been a massive emotional swing, let alone just the scoreboard. I'm still, like I said, I'm still not convinced that this defense wouldn't have stepped up and that they wouldn't have done things to maybe come back and win this game anyway. But what a colossal failure of a moment. But you know what? I guarantee you he'll never do it again.
Probably not. And, you know, I'm not ever into the whole the no fun league idea, right, where everyone references the days back in Barry Sanders would just hand the ball to the referee. But I will say this. If you do that, you'll never drop it before you get past the goal line if you end up handing it to the refs. So, yeah, that's tough. Jonathan Cooper said after the game, if he would have scored that touchdown, it would have been even more of a dogfight to get back. I just hope it never happens to us. And that's the thing. It doesn't ever happen to you. You have to do it. And for the Colts, obviously, it hurt. Even Sean Payton after the game had some sympathy for Shane Steichen on the other side, basically being very careful not to pile on Taylor, but starting a sentence basically saying, yeah, I don't understand why, and then letting that slide, saying really tough for them to have to deal with, but happy to be on the other side of it. The Broncos do get that win. It looks more one-sided than it is. Bo Nix with 3 passing touchdowns, another multiple touchdown game. That's good. 130 yards passing, though, is not, and 3 interceptions, making it 5 in the last 2 games, is also not. There's a concern a little bit about that. You know, we'll get into it more as the week goes along, but seeing as in the previous 10 games, Bo Nix had thrown 2 interceptions, 5 in the last 2 against the caliber of teams like the Browns and the Colts. I find it a little bit concerning, but judging by your body language, you don't.
No, of course I find it concerning. I mean, anytime you're doing turnovers, I find it concerning. Just look at Kirk Cousins in the game tonight when we talk about the Monday night doubleheader. I mean, if we want to talk about concern for turnovers, there it is right there.
Primetime too.
So I don't think that there's it. I don't want to downplay it. But at the same time, I do want to lean into something that we talked about last week prior to this game against the Colts, and that is that when you have a rookie quarterback like this, mistakes are going to come. I think that it is far more does throwing all the picks give you cause for concern? Of course, but we also went through a stretch of him not making mistakes, which was a bit of an oddity for a rookie quarterback, regardless of how good you are. So I think that I'm trying to balance the either side of the fulcrum here, Sean. I'm trying to recognize that, okay, he went through a stretch where he wasn't doing anything wrong. Okay, now we got a little bit where some things are going wrong, but what you are giving him more than anything else is the experience of being an NFL quarterback and understanding how you have to be able to bounce back. And that's something that Sean Payton and Bo Nix both talked about post-game yesterday afternoon. It's what Sean Payton talked about this morning in his Zoom call press conference with the media. He talked about Nix's ability to bounce back. And if you have these kinds of moments, yeah, it sucks as a fan because you're just I was screaming in the South stands. But at the same time, okay, I'm serving to you, Bo, on a silver platter, the examples of what to learn from.
Well, that's certainly true. And these were more or less self-inflicted. And Sean Payton talked about one of them was being basically a bad read and a bad throw. Some of the others were, he took the blame for some of that, putting the play calling on himself. At the same time, I think if you look at all three of those picks, they were all, let's just say, as the people in statistics deal with it, turnover worthy.
Oh, sure.
Not a shock that all three of those throws
one of
were
them threw right to him. So,
right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they were poor picks. They were poor reads. They were poor throws. It was everything about it was bad. On the bright side, as you pointed out, 10 games in the middle of the season, he threw 4 picks in the first 2 games, 2 picks in the next 10, and 5 in the next of the last 2. And I think if you learn from that and get going forward, now, you know what would help? A running game. Jeff Legwalt of ESPN called it in his game story, the Broncos running game, ornamental at best, which I think is a pretty darn good way of putting it. This team has to figure out something with the running game where you're seeing back to the way it was. It's almost as if the Broncos were getting some ability earlier in the year. You know, the running game got better and better. Not that it was ever good. It was never good. But it got better, and Bo Nix needed to run less and less as a result. And guess what? When he was running fewer times, he also was throwing fewer picks. Now the Broncos' running game seems to be devolving again. Nobody could average more than 3 yards a carry. They really couldn't do much at all. Nix had to be the leading rusher again. Quarterback's best friend is always the running game. The Broncos, I understand it's too late to do anything personnel-wise, but they've got to figure out some sort of identity, because this was almost a scenario in which the Colts were basically stopping the run, playing a zone defense, and daring Nix and the Broncos to beat them. And they did do it, but really, besides the one bad breakdown that led to Cortland Sutton's very easy touchdown, they held the Broncos in check or worse.
Yeah,
for the majority of the game.
Yeah, but the right now the best part of this team is who won you the game. It's the defense.
Correct. Obviously.
So
yeah.
I mean, again, we will over the course of between now and Thursday afternoon, as we get ready for the Thursday night game against the Chargers, we're going to pick this apart. We're going to look for where things can be able to get better. But guess what? You needed your defense to step up. And they won you a game. I'd like to remind everyone that is the only reason the Broncos won Super Bowl 50 is because of their defense. Period. End of story. Peyton Manning wasn't going to win you that game. The defense won you that game. And so guess what? That's what happened yesterday at Empower Field. The defense won you the game. I mean, I know it's technically a fumble return because it was a backwards pass, but I mean, you basically had 3 picks in that game. And that's spectacular for this defense. They picked up the slack when the offense needed them to be able to do it. And so I think that is what you want to see in total in a contest. Your special teams helped you.
Yes.
Marvin Mims helped you in this game. Your defense helped you. Bo Nix helped you when you needed him to. Yes, he made a lot of mistakes, but he also had 3 touchdown passes. And so at times you found a way to be able to get this done. Each of the phases of this Broncos team found a way to contribute. Did they also screw up a couple of times? You betcha. But they also found a way to be able to get it done. I mean, let's keep in mind that as you're going through what took place in this game, Broncos were losing at halftime and then pitched a shutout for 2 quarters.
Right.
That's spectacular.
Yeah, it really is. And look, it is aided by the fact that to be fair, Anthony Richardson makes Tim Tebow look like Drew Brees.
Oh yeah, he's got a QBR that just blows.
It is bad. I mean, when this guy is off platform, as they like to say, he throws a slightly better than me and Nate. I mean, the accuracy is really, really poor for Richardson. And over in Indy, obviously, a lot of the talk today is about Jonathan Taylor's fumble, but a lot of it is also looking back and saying, until we can rely on Anthony Richardson as a passer to hit open players, their offense has a ceiling, and it most certainly does. That was to their advantage. The Broncos really kind of unleashed the pass rush once they got a lead, and that kind of wrought havoc with the rest of what the Colts were doing. But the Broncos find a way to get it done, and they get a couple breaks going their way. Of course, the Chargers do lose. We talked about this.
Chargers didn't just lose. The Chargers got spanked.
Absolutely thumped by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And
that was embarrassing.
I've been talking about this for a couple weeks. I'm not saying the Chargers are a bad football team. They are not. And they are also very likely to make the playoffs, even though the Broncos have now jumped them into the 6th spot. But this idea that the Chargers had the same kind of defense like the Broncos had, right? Because of some of the opponents they played earlier in the year. If you want to make any criticisms about the Broncos' results as opposed to their schedule, that's fine. It's a valid criticism.
It is.
They haven't beaten a single team that has a winning record yet. Now, they're undefeated against teams that have a losing record, so you'll take it. But the Chargers haven't been much better. And so now all of a sudden they get into this game on Thursday with an opportunity to put some distance between them and the Chargers. And believe me, when you're talking about the 6th spot as opposed to the 7th spot, you're avoiding either the Bills or the Chiefs in the first round. Yeah, I'll take that. Thank you very much. Even though it's not going to be easy to take on Pittsburgh or perhaps Houston, in depending on how those finish out for those teams.
No, I wouldn't mind playing Houston.
I wouldn't mind playing either one of them over the Chiefs or the Bills.
I wouldn't mind playing the Texans right now.
Don't give me the Chiefs or the Bills in the first round.
I'm not looking for the Broncos to bounce out of the first round or anything like that. If they make the playoffs, this is a win, folks. This is all gravy at that point. But if you give me my pick, give me Houston.
Yeah, first winning season since 2016 when they finished 9-7 for the Broncos. That's exciting. Now the opportunity to end the playoff drought as well. And it's very simple. We talked about this on Friday, the opportunity, Nate, to have destiny in your own hands and take advantage of it. The Broncos is easy. Win one game. You got 3 left.
Oh yeah.
Win one.
That's all you got to. That's why this Thursday night one I think is going to be.
You win this one
is going to be interesting.
You might lock up the 6th.
Well, and if you look at it, and I know we're talking about some of the upcoming games and things like that. Sean Payton kind of let the cat out of the bag about the Bengals game this morning, saying that I don't know if it's official or not. It looks like we're playing on Saturday. I'm like, I don't think you were supposed to say that, Sean, but you did. So it looks like that's, because there had been talk about, okay, are the Broncos and the Bengals going to get flexed into Sunday night because it's going to have an impact? It could, right? Things like that. Well, it sounds like, according to what Sean Payton said in the presser, that they're going to put the Broncos and the Bengals on Saturday. So that game winds up being on the, what does that make it? 28th? Am I right about that? Saturday, right? Because it's the same day as the bowl game, right?
CU and CSU.
Isn't that the same day?
That'd be the same.
Danny's nodding. He says yes. Danny, nobody can hear you because you're not on the camp. You're just. Danny's like,
well,
and he's like, well, not only can nobody see you,
he's not trying to.
Nobody can hear you.
He's trying to help us, Nate.
I don't know. He's over there like, I don't know. He's probably
trying to make us look smart.
Anyway, so I think in the presser this morning, I think Sean Payton kind of let the cat out of the bag about what the schedule is going to be.
Obviously,
well, and it makes sense for the Broncos because if you're playing on Thursday, you got extra rest no matter what.
On Sunday, they have to come back on Saturday, so you get extra rest against a Bengals team. That's
sorry, Joe Burrow.
It really seems
just beat the Chargers and let's get this over.
Right, beat the Chargers. Get yourself a lead on the Chargers there and get that 6th seed all but locked up. And then look, you get into the playoffs and you can take your chances. But obviously a lot of things really leveled out when we're talking about the way that the AFC went. And there's some major injuries across the league. David Montgomery may be out for the season for the Lions, who are already missing Aiden Hutchinson. They obviously had
we can talk about
shootout
that. I don't
against
think
the Bills.
That sucks for the Lions, but they've still got Jimmy.
Yeah, they got a lot going there. Patrick Mahomes diagnosed possibly the high ankle sprain, could very well miss the next game. The Chiefs still finding a way to win. They're 13-1, but you don't want to lose that guy for any stretch of time, especially because Josh Allen, it seems like every time he steps out, you should start playing the old Superman movie theme, because that guy is on another level right now. He's got to be the MVP of the league. But things break well for the Broncos. They find themselves in a position where one more win nets them a playoff berth, and they have finally gotten themselves a winning season one way or the other to do all of that. And I know there's 3 games left, and we're not going to put a bow on this season yet, pun somewhat intended. But with a rookie quarterback and an NFL record dead cap hit, to find themselves where they are right now is really a credit to the coaching of Sean Payton, the drafting of George Payton, and some savvy signings as well. Even looking over the details of the Garrett Bowles contract when it finally came out, actually looks pretty favorable for the Broncos too. They find themselves in a good position with a lot of their players not even in their prime yet.
Yeah, I mean, look, we said it last week. My hope was if they or 2 weeks ago, I guess, if they were gonna keep Bowles.
And they did.
If they were going to keep him, I wanted to make sure that it was on a team-friendly deal.
It's as team-friendly as
it's
you can
about
get
as team. It's about as team-friendly as you can get for a left tackle. I agree. They didn't go crazy. I had said that, and you had actually agreed, Sean, that you said, Garrett Bowles might be the kind of guy that would be team-friendly just to be able to, finish everything and just be like, my entire career was as a Denver Bronco, and and then ride off into the sunset.
He likes being here. He likes fishing.
He likes it here.
Lifestyle. Yeah,
it just kind of fits him really well. I think you're right. And so, as those details came out, you do say, okay, fine. They gave him something that is that is team friendly, but that also obviously takes care of him with that guaranteed money that was included. So I think all of it comes out really well. Look, yesterday was a bit of a roller coaster, but what was really interesting was as many mistakes and the way that the first half went. I can tell you that the vibe of the fans and the people that were around me, everybody was sort of like scratching their head, but nobody was panicking.
Yeah.
And what's wild is I want you guys to think about this team 12 months ago, 24 months ago, 36 months ago. We all would have been panicking, and some people would have just been leaving the stadium.
Oh, yeah, they would have left
if it was sitting there. If it was 13-7 at halftime, there's a whole bunch of people that would have
if it had been 20-7, if Taylor hadn't dropped it, in the third quarter, people
would have started to leave, because that is the vibe and that is the mentality. Yep, that's the mentality that fans and everybody would have had, and that is different this year. And to me, that's one of the biggest wins of this team and of what is happening in Denver right now is the fact that the fan base didn't do that after so many seasons of doing it.
Yeah, obviously it is kind of warming up the idea the Broncos are back. Are they Super Bowl contenders yet? Maybe not. Probably not. But you get in the playoffs and who knows what happens. But I agree with you. I don't think that's the goal. The idea was see if you could get a winning record, get in the playoffs. Nate and I thought they'd win 6 games max, so it's all gravy at this point.
I thought it was 5.
Headed in the right direction.
Straight up with y'all. I thought they were going to win 5.
6 doesn't make much difference in that regard. And Troy
Renck, went on the road and won.
Thought it was 6 as well.
Son of a
So they're getting things done very, very well. We'll talk about the defensive players of the year. And now the Broncos might actually have not just a dark horse, but maybe one of the favorites. But if you're looking for the perfect place to work, play, exercise, socialize, and maybe as the holiday season creeps up, lose a couple of those extra pounds that you may or may not happen to put on over the next couple weeks, I'll certainly take a couple that you don't, I'm sure. Look no further than the Denver Athletic Club, right in the heart of downtown Denver. As a DAC member, you'll enjoy all the top-notch amenities you expect: a full fitness center, spa, massage, Pilates, sure, but a licensed childcare center while you work out. How about that? Or a golf simulator, and even more. But what truly sets the DAC apart is its vibrant community. The member-owned club is all about you, offering year-round social events, co-working, dining, fun for the entire family. The Denver Athletic Club is truly a club for your whole life. So take a look at joining the DAC today. Get yourself a Christmas present that will last all year. Visit denverathleticlub.cc for all the details. Nate, the defensive player of the year usually goes, by and large, to the person who either gets the most sacks or the most picks, right? Now, there's a good argument to be made, and it's usually on a team that made the playoffs. Okay. So there's an argument to be made for 2 of the guys that lead the league in interceptions: Xavier McKinney of the Packers and Kirby Joseph of the Lions, who each have 7 interceptions. And Kirby Joseph has a touchdown, returned 1 for the year. Okay. But there are 5 players that have 11 or more sacks. The league leader, 12.5, is Trey Hendrickson of Cincinnati. They do not appear to be going to the playoffs, barring something strange. Daniil Hunter of the Texans has 12. He's been very good. TJ Watt, perennial contender, 11.5. Myles Garrett, 11. But tucked in there, tied with Watt, now Nick Bonitto at 11.5. Remarkable to think that Bonitto didn't even play starter number of snaps in the early parts of the year. And now, of course, he's turned into a terror. 11.5 sacks on the season. He also has an interception, which returned for a touchdown. He has a fumble recovery. The one yesterday was technically a fumble because the pass from Adonis Mitchell was a lateral. Mitchell, after the game, said that he thought the play would have worked until number 15 turned into Ed Reed and went and grabbed it. So he has a touchdown there. But when you look at the players that are in the mix, there's still probably a lot of people around the country who still haven't heard of Nick Bonitto, and I get that. But he's the only player in the league with 10 or more sacks and an interception and a touchdown. And, of course, he has 2 touchdowns. The only player to have 10-plus sacks and 2 or more touchdowns in the last however many years, 10 years ago, J.J. Watt had that, and he ended up with Defensive Player of the Year. Nick Bonitto has J.J. Watt numbers right now. That is pretty stunning. And the way he has played, obviously, you can talk about how energized the building got, but when he talked about it after the game, jumps the route, I suppose, the throwback to Richardson, but his description for the way he broke it down was pretty fascinating. And I'll get back into that in a minute because it has little to do with the idea of what we call instinct and more to do with a much more advanced process. But obviously for Bonitto, another tremendous game. He is becoming one of those guys where offensive coordinators scout the Broncos and say, we have to account for number 15 on every play. And it's not since Von Miller have they had a player like that.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to sit back and say that you've got somebody that causes offensive coordinators to have a headache, because that is, that was Vaughn, as you just pointed out. And now you're back to having somebody that is causing that kind of havoc. I think he should be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. I also believe that some of those other names that are out there, and the fact that he was not the full-time guy back at the beginning of the season, and therefore he's missing some of those numbers. I think that may ultimately wind up costing him being at the elite top of the list. I do think that there isn't necessarily, Sean, that clear-cut guy this year for Defensive Player of the Year as there has been in years past. So that could play into his favor. But at the same time, I think that the idea that he hasn't been able to have the starter numbers, as you just pointed out, right back at the beginning of the season, is probably what will keep him maybe in the conversation, but in what maybe will be for the voting, the second tier of the conversation.
Well, who might appreciate that? George Payton, who after next year, Nick Bonitto is going to be a free agent. Yeah. One would presume this is the time to start opening those negotiations with Nick Bonitto. And if he's not Defensive Player of the Year, but playing like Defensive Player of the Year, that would work out pretty nicely for the Broncos. He's still got a ways to go with the 11.5 sacks. You're thinking, if you're wondering, how far is that up? The record, a lot of you may know, is 18.5 by Von Miller back in 2012. But a couple more sacks, getting up to 13.5. That ties him with Simon Fletcher, who had their 13.5 back in 91 and 93. Anything beyond that gets you into the top 5 for the Broncos ever. Miller with 18.5, Elvis Dumervil with 17 in 09, Simon Fletcher with 16 in 92, and then Miller with 14.5 and 14 in 28 and 2014 respectively. But when you're talking about maybe a few more guys you jump over with only 2 more sacks, when you're jumping over Trevor Price, Carl Mecklenburg, Alfred Williams, Rulon Jones, you're getting into a special territory. These are guys that are in the Ring of Fame or Broncos legends across the board.
Yeah, you're getting into some rare air, and he talked about the fact that he was happy to join his favorite player. That was the words that he used when he talked about Von Miller. So, look, the beauty of the potential of the Player of the Year conversation for Nick Bonitto. The beauty of it is, I don't care how hard voters and commentators and things try to avoid this. Recency bias is a hell of a drug. And if he continues to do this down the stretch at the end of the season, then that is what's going to be top of mind. And then I think you can start to make that argument of, well, okay, because of the starter snaps or things like that, like he didn't even have a sack in the first 2 games. Okay. He had like 2 tackles total in the first 2 games. That was it. Or maybe it was 3. But there were no sacks there. What he's done in the 11.5 sacks that he has on the season has happened over the course of the recency bias again that I bring up. The fact that if you go back and look overall at the 14 games that he has played, there's 3 out of those 14 where he does not have a sack. but 2 of those 3 were weeks 1 and week 2. And it was simply because of the snap count that he was out there for. Now he comes in, he steps up and he performs. And perhaps what you can see in terms of recency may be something that is on the voters' mind. I do think he's a little bit of a long shot. However, even the fact that we're talking about this is fun.
Yeah, and you're right, because you talk about the first couple games without the sacks, and then ever since then, only one game without one. He gets a half sack yesterday, and it's only been one. It was the very difficult to sack Lamar Jackson. Wasn't able to get him. Well, join the club. That's a lot of people can't grab Lamar Jackson, but it really has been a stunning run by Bonitto. And remember, it's to get an idea of how impactful it's really been. The Broncos, for the last couple of seasons, have been hoping that Baron Browning would get healthy, because Baron Browning was perceived to be the best of their edge guys, better than Jonathan Cooper, better than Bonitto. It was just a matter of getting him healthy. Well, Cooper continued to grind, and by the way, he's got 8 sacks again. Cooper's been an awfully effective player for the Broncos as well. But Cooper eventually pushed Browning out because of his consistency and ability to play. And then Bonitto's explosiveness pushed Browning right off the team. So that part is singularly impressive. Give credit, by the way, to the Broncos pass rush as a whole. John Franklin Myers was outstanding. You got a sack from Dondre Tillman. Malcolm Roach was really good. When they they put their ears back and went after Anthony Richardson, things were remarkable when you talk about the run. 49% of his drawbacks got pressure. On those, he completed 39% of his passes.
Yeah,
and the passer rating 24.1 under pressure.
Yeah, those are the numbers that you expect out of Anthony Richardson. It's the reason why Colts fans are so frustrated in Indianapolis with what they've had from a quarterback play, is because when he does have that pressure, he does make mistakes, or he's forced to throw it out of bounds, or throw it awkwardly, and therefore his receivers aren't able to come up with it. So I think that there's the pressure that the defense continues to do, and that's why I say I think yesterday's game, as many faults as we can find. Bo Nix had a QBR of 15, y'all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like there were a lot of faults in this game, but you know what matters? Scoreboard. And that scoreboard was influenced by special teams. I come back to this again. It was impacted by Marvin Mims, and it was impacted by the defense in obvious ways. So, when you force what is, for all intents and purposes, 3 interceptions in the game, when you have Mims with a spectacular run that sets up a short field, those are the kinds of things that I believe, like I'll use Mims, just Mims in general. Forget the interceptions that the team had. Just what Mims did in particular on that one return. That to me aids in the ability for Bo Nix to shake the Etch-a-Sketch and to start clean, right? And to remove from his mistakes that happen, because your teammate just set you up. Your teammate just handed you a gift and said, hey man, go get him. And oh, by the way, you're going to do it on a short field, right? Like, those are the things that I think that play into what we have all been able to see, and what Sean Payton has been harping on for months about Bo Nix mentally, that little bit of swagger, that little bit of moxie, the steady heart rate, all those kinds of things that Bo has. But his teammates gave him gifts. They gave him the gift with the interception. That interception by Pat Surtain was nuts. The way he contorted himself.
Travis Hunter-esque.
That was crazy. Like, I know we're all talking about what Bonitto did in terms of the Ed Reed moment, right? Man, Pat was like Gumby catching that thing. That was gorgeous.
Phenomenal. Brandon Jones with another pick as well. He was really impactful in that game. But for Bonitto, after the game, talked about how he kind of sniffed that play out. And I'm paraphrasing a bit. But he said he noticed the play was slow developing and realized something was off. Then you saw Richardson start to backpedal and basically took the educated guess and said, all right, I'm going to break on this, that either I'll tackle Richardson or see what happens. And you'll hear people talk about it and they'll say, what great instincts. And here's the thing that I think that Bonitto and players get shortchanged for. Instincts are part of it, but that's not really instinct. Think about it. You see the snap. You realize the play is developing slower than expected. You realize, okay, that something's up. That's not instinct. That's processing.
Yeah.
You then scan around to see what's going on. You notice the quarterback starting to back off of the play after throwing the ball to the wide receiver. He's not holding his place. He's not going forward. So you realize something's off there. Then he realizes that Mr. Mitchell's not going forward, immediately breaks on Richardson by the time the ball is up in the air, and his eyes had to be wide as saucers, realizing if I get this, I'm gone. And so, yeah, you can say good instincts to break on the play, but it's not really instinct. That's processing. That's the ability to identify the play, to break down what is happening in real time, and then basically do the little probability matrix in your head and decide on the wisest course of action. Then to execute and pull it off is all another part of the equation. But when you talk about Nick Bonitto's growth, it is not just he's got good instincts and good speed and good bend and good leverage, except for the quarterback. What he's doing is smart football. It's processing, it's speed. And that's one of the reasons I think the season's been so impressive.
Absolutely. There's just good things happening on this team right now, and it's a lot of fun. I'm excited to see what will happen by the time they get through a draft and an offseason and some free agency kinds of moments. I'm looking forward to what this team can carry forward out of this year, regardless of what happens from a postseason standpoint. Having 9 wins, boom, you got that monkey off your back. You stop having losing seasons. That was a big step forward. Having a quarterback that you know is going to be your quarterback for a while. Check that box as well. You found some talent in Nick Bonitto. You found what you have in Jonathan Cooper. You obviously already know what you have in Pat Surtain. And I know, we unfortunately have had to been dealing with an injury, but you found something pretty damn cool with Riley Moss. So there are good things happening. I would like when Mims had that return yesterday, I was just like, man, I had to have been smiling ear to ear, because I was like, for crying out loud, we finally got some special teams here.
Yeah.
We finally have, Will Lutz has been great, but you want to try to play that field position game. And I don't need Devin Hester, man. I really don't. I just need something that gives a gift to the quarterback every now and then. And right when this team needed it yesterday, Mims did it.
Yeah. Big moments there. You have to win in all 3 phases, and when one of them isn't going that well, the other 2 have to step up. They did exactly that. We have an opportunity to break down a little bit with Troy Renck, of course, of the Denver Post. We'll have Nate back in a minute. We have 2 Monday Night Football games, so we'll have to break all those down as well. But Troy joins us, courtesy of the Post, and the host of the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck, a new one up there today with Parker Gabriel of the Post, breaking down a game that, Troy, you called a little bit greasy.
Yeah, listen, the Broncos would have lost this game over the last 8 years. So let's give them credit for winning the game when they played just absolutely brutal football offensively for 3 quarters. And they benefit, like we've talked about during these last 7-8 years, how it feels like they're cursed a little bit, like they sold their soul for Super Bowl 50. They got lucky yesterday. The Colts, Jonathan Taylor, that might be the dumbest play I've ever seen live in covering a game. I didn't cover the Leon Lett game, but that might be the dumbest play I've ever seen for a guy who's going to go to Yale if he didn't go to Wisconsin. Everybody loves him. Smart guy. That was an absolutely embarrassing play. And then the throwback play, throwing it to a receiver who struggles to catch the ball all year, who then spends about 7-8 seconds trying to get a grip on a football before throwing it back to Richardson, that deserved a laugh track. I mean, these are 2 of the dumbest plays I've ever seen. And Sean, as well as anyone, these are the kind of plays the Broncos would do, or they would never get any luck. Well, they got lucky yesterday. With those 2, and they made something out of it. And to your point, Bonitto showed amazing situational awareness. He's put himself firmly in Defensive Player of the Year conversation because he's on a really good defense that's on a team that's going to the playoffs, so he's in that conversation. It'd be weird because is he their best defensive player? I mean, most would probably tell you it's Pat Surtain, but, there's a chance by the end of the year it is Bonitto. He has 15 sacks, 2 touchdowns. So, but listen, they got to be better offensively. Bo went 10 games with 2 interceptions. He has 5 in his past 2 games. He knows he has to be better, and Sean Payton has got to resist the gravitational pull to drop back and pass so much. They got to get boring again. They got to get a little boring again, especially this Thursday in a rock fight against the Chargers.
Yeah, I think that's an important note there. They're trying. You're exactly right, because our colleague Jeff Legwald at ESPN called their running game ornamental at best, which I thought you'd appreciate, because that's pretty much what it looks like. 18 carries for 49 yards for the running backs, only 2.7 per. Nobody, not Jaleel McLaughlin, not Javonte Williams, not Audric Estime, could get it done on the ground. And until they do, you're going to start seeing teams do a little bit what the Colts did, just back off, play zone, and force Bo Nix to beat them. And if they don't get the running game going, it's great they have a winning season. It's great they're likely going to make the playoffs. It's definitely going to be one and done if you can't do a lot better than what we saw against a Colts team that is not exactly a defensive juggernaut.
Well, that was the surprise, is zone defense usually allows yourself to have boring completions, and they weren't there. And some of it's on drops, some of it's on routes. It wasn't all Bo. And the fact that the Colts came in ranked 31st against the run. And it just looked like there were no fits. Some of it's on the backs. There's no doubt, but obviously the line has to block better. And the fact that Bo Nix was their best runner again, that's how it was against Pittsburgh and Seattle. And you lose games like that. And again, it always sounds personal. It's not, but at some point you've got to give S a chance to be the starter. I mean, Javonte Williams is now at 16 yards on 18 carries over his last 3 games. I get it. He's really good in pass pro, and they have a rookie quarterback. But it's like the self-fulfilling prophecy of you run him on first and second down, 1 yard, 2 yards, then you need him on pass pro because it's 3rd and 7. You wouldn't need him on pass pro if it was 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 3. So I think it's time to take a really long, hard look at how they're using their running backs and look at the fit in the run game, because yesterday was a mess. It wasn't just the backs, but you got to be better than that. You can't be asking Bo Nix, especially these last 3 games, Chargers, and then against an explosive Bengals offense, and then the Chiefs, if they're playing their guys, they're not going to beat those teams one-dimensional. If you're one-dimensional offensively, you're not going to win that, and you're not going to win a playoff game on the road being one-dimensional. You might down the road, Bo's 3rd, 4th year. You're not going to do it with the weapons they have right now in the pass game to try to win a one-dimensional offensive game. So, again, you can learn from it. Much better to learn from it in a win if you're Broncos country. But let's be real here. We've reframed expectations. People have said, Troy's a rookie. I get it. But we saw for 10 games what it can look like. The league's adjusting. Now you got a counterpunch. This is what the league is. This is why the NFL season's so hard. 17 games, you don't get any layups in the NFL. There's no Mercer on your schedule. There's no directional school on your schedule. So you got to regroup. And for me, that means get a little boring. And because if you're going to beat the Chargers specifically on a short week, you've got to win at the line of scrimmage. And that's not just defensively. You've got to win at the line of scrimmage offensively.
Did you get the impression that maybe that changing the guard may have happened because Estime's carries more or less all came late when it was pretty evident they had run a couple times directly with Williams. He wasn't able to get anything going, and then Estime got his carries in that late point. The Broncos were trying to run the clock out. Did you get maybe the impression that might have been one of the situations where this is starting to turn and Javonte Williams' ineffectiveness is simply too much for Sean Payton to ignore?
I mean, it feels like it when you watch it, but it just, again, would I be shocked if Javonte starts or Jaleel starts against the Chargers? I wouldn't. I mean, nothing surprises me. They trust those two more than Estime. It's clear. Mm-hmm. It's just frustrating to me when they're, Javonte's going nowhere and Jaleel's going nowhere. Estime finally gets a carry. What was that, late 3rd, early 4th? Sean, you would know. Goes 6 yards, then we don't see him again.
Right.
And then Peyton talks about at halftime with the CBS crew, I think it was CBS, that, hey, we got to run the football. We got to be more balanced. We can't be dropping back so much. And they come out and throw 3 straight passes. Like they've got to commit to the run game again. Stay balanced. But you can't commit to the run game if you're starting running backs averaging less than a yard or carry over 3 games. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's easy for Sean Payton to turn around the argument to me and say, well, I can't run when we can't run, so we got to pass. Well, that might be. And maybe their run game really is spiraling. But I'd want to see Estime for about 20 carries before I drew that conclusion.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Regarding Nix and having to carry the ball, we talked about him being their leading rusher again. When Bo Nix this year, and look, I always like to tell people when you talk about these statistics, causality and commonality are not the same thing. But when Bo Nix has more than 10 rushing yards in a game, He has thrown 9 of his 11 interceptions. Is it as simple as he's a rookie, and if you have to have him, you're piling a little bit more on his plate, you're asking him to do just a little bit too much, that right now that you increase the risk of him making an error?
Well, it's a fascinating thing with Bo, and I'm going to be researching this over the next couple of days, but he's done a remarkable job, Sean, making game-to-game adjustments. But in games where he struggled to make in-game adjustments, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So 1 interception has led to 2, and in this case, 2 led to 3. And there's a commonality in all of these games where he struggled. It really starts with his feet. He starts hopping around and bouncing, and when he bounces, then he gets out of whack mechanically. The throws sell, and there's a little bit, when I went back and watched some of the game today, of him trying to do too much. And that is part of who he is. Like, part of the reason at Auburn it went sideways. Now, 3 coordinators in 3 years there, whatever. But at the end of his time at Auburn, he definitely tried to do too much. He was playing hero ball. And there was moments yesterday where it felt like he was trying to make plays that weren't there. And I get it. You're playing great. You're having an amazing season. But the NFL will remind you. I mean, Clint Hurdle has a famous saying about MLB that, there are those who've been humbled and those who are about to be. And as a quarterback in the NFL, it's tough. And it felt like at times he was trying to make plays that weren't there. I mean, the Sutton pick after the turnover, the one where he stared him down, he was late. It was a bad throw. Like, that's where, for me, like Davis Webb and Sean, you go back in the lab. Hey, let's make sure we get our feet right, get our shoulders squared, and get back to being on time, on target. We don't need, shoulder open, sidearm throw. Like, that's when you're feeling it in a game when you're on a heater. And there just was too much yesterday where Bo he looked like, frankly, the guy we saw at Seattle against Pittsburgh. He was ball it back. His mechanics got out of whack. And I'm not panicked about it because I've seen him fix it. But I do think going forward, especially with the urgency of these games, he's got to be able to fix it faster in game. And even he admitted, like, you do as a quarterback have these thoughts of, man, if every pass I'm going to throw is going to get picked. Like, you have doubts. It's not different than a hitter. Like, am I going to, every time I see a curveball, am I going to swing through it? So he's got to work through it. He is a rookie, and that does need to be contextualized. But we've reframed expectations, so we expect more from him. But also, I do think Sean Payton has to protect him. He has to protect him more when he starts to struggle in a game like that. Because honestly, if Taylor scores that touchdown, and I know Broncos country doesn't want to hear it, I think the Broncos lose yesterday.
I do too.
I honestly do. It was going to be, 20-7. The stadium was on mute, dead. And the offense is doing nothing. So I just think when you see your quarterback struggling, the answer isn't to give him more. It's to give him less. Let's try to win it a different way. Because in these next few games against better teams, if they play like that offensively, they're going to lose. And there's no crime in that. They've won 9 games. But they will lose if they play like this offensively against these next 3 teams.
Yeah, 4 out of the 6 games in which Nick's has thrown picks, he's thrown multiple picks, to your point. And that's obviously something that's concerning. It does seem to correlate a little bit when he's got to run and move more. The mechanics get out of whack. This is normal. But I thought your point of the hero ball was interesting because I was looking back at my notes that I took when I watched it, and then I took them again this morning and want to make sure that I see the same thing. And one word, and it's probably a little harsh, but it's the word I wrote in the moment. You referred to it as hero ball. I wrote down overconfident. I thought that the Knicks in the last couple of weeks have kind of played a little overconfident, feeling his own oats a little bit. And some of this has to do with the fact that the running game is not good. And Sean Payton, you're right, isn't necessarily helping him. There has to be something with the identity there. It is a short week. Let's get into that in a moment, but I want to take one second to talk about Chris Abrams-Draine, who started obviously in this game, a second NFL game, looked tremendous, was targeted 6 times, allowed only 1 catch. His pass breakup in the end zone was potentially a game-changing play. He did not look overmatched. He looked athletic. He looked smart. Everything looked promising there. Given the health concerns for Riley Moss, it feels as if they found another in Abrams-Draine, a player that a lot of people thought was the steal coming out of the draft. It took him a while to get going, but now all of a sudden, Riley Moss, we know we've got there. If Abrams-Draine is that kind of player, plus you have Surtain, of course, and Jaquan McMillan, boy, the Broncos cornerback situation is looking pretty stacked.
Yeah, because this week there's a real chance there's going to be no Surtain and no Moss. I don't expect Moss back until Cincinnati, and there's a chance Pat plays. I mean, it's an ankle sprain, but there's also a chance they say, you know what, maybe we give it a week because we don't want him limping through the end of the season. I mean, I know he wants to play, obviously. That's why he went back in yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Got to win one of them. And but to your point about Chris Abrams-Draine, cap tip to our guy at the Post, Ryan McFadden. He was all over him in the draft. He loved him. And he reminds me a little of Jaquan McMillan. He plays with an edge. He plays with an aggressiveness. He wants the challenge. And I love it. I love it because, the worst thing you want a kid to do is go in there and be tentative and afraid to make a mistake. And he is playing with confidence that belies his experience. He's only played, what a handful of snaps, essentially. But he looked good. And so if it could be Damari Mathis and Chris Abrams-Draine on the corners on the outside in this game, I'll say this. If there's one game you'd want it's probably this because the Chargers don't really have outside weapons. I mean, Ladd McConkey's clearly their best receiver, and I would think Jaquan McMillan's going to be matched with him in the slot a lot. So, but to your point, man, to have that kind of depth and see that between Draine and Moss, we'll see what Moss looks like when he comes back. That's a tough injury to come back from during the season. But Surtain and Moss were a top 5 corner duo in the league. And you saw how much he missed him when Wallace started against Cleveland. But again, people think to be plug and play guys. It's not college, folks. It's not. And it only takes 1-2 plays. We saw it with Damari Mathis. He had the worst debut where he had like 4 penalties, played great. And then the next year he got beat a couple times and he could not regain his confidence. It is such a difficult position mentally to play, and you have got to have amnesia. You've got to have selective memory. You've got to have that ability not to panic. And everything about that position feels like panic because you're on an island. You're out there against these guys that are elite. And I love what I'm seeing from Draine. Love it. Like you said, that play in the end zone, textbook. He was on him. He turns late. And then the receiver tries to kind of basically force an interference by pulling him into him, and he didn't fall for it. That was just perfect coverage because, like you said, if that goes as interference and the ball's at the 1 yard line, again, who knows what happens in that game.
The Broncos now have a short week before they face the Chargers. We know about the rivalry. They lost to the Chargers earlier this year, but now they have a 1-game lead thanks to the Chargers' face plant against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What's the focus on the next couple of days for the Broncos besides the obvious in health?
Yeah, it's tough. These Thursday weeks, they don't even practice. It's walkthroughs. It's really about mental reps, recovery, and mental reps. It helps when you're playing a division opponent you've played already. There's a familiarity there. Again, here's the deal. If you're going to beat the Chargers and you're going to beat Jim Harbaugh, you got to be ready to have a bare-knuckle brawl. You got to be able to win at the line of scrimmage. They want to make it a rock fight. Jim Harbaugh would love to have 20 minutes of time of possession in the first half and run it down your throat. So the first priority, stop the run. And the Broncos struggled with that in the first quarter yesterday. But after that, the defense was excellent. You got to stop the run, and you got to find a way either through the run game or the short passing game to keep the offense on the field. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. But I think they're in a better position. Again, they have to win one of these next 3. It would be nice to get it out of the way because Cincinnati's just a weirdly, oddly dangerous team because they score so many points, but they also might have the worst defense in the league. They're certainly in that conversation. And then you don't want it to come down to the Chiefs. Maybe the Chiefs aren't playing for anything, but you don't want it to come down to the Chiefs to get into the playoffs. I don't think that's ideal. So I think it's going to be a rock fight. I think we're looking at 17-16, 13-10 type of game.
He is Troy Renck. Make sure you check out everything Troy puts together at the Denver Post. And while you're at it, download the latest Broncos podcast with Troy Renck, good one with Parker Gabriel of the Post as well, breaking down this game because the next one's coming up real quick. So, Troy, appreciate it. Looking forward to talking with you again Friday after this. We'll have a better idea where the Broncos stand. But it's kind of refreshing saying, this previous game was the biggest one for the Broncos in 9 years when they were back at 8-4 in 2016. And now guess what? The one on Thursday is the biggest one in 9 years, and maybe even potentially more than that. So an exciting run for the Broncos, and maybe when you're talking about a rookie quarterback, all the dead cap money, a lot better. We talked about it with Nate as well than any of the 3 of us thought it was going to be. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, listen, enjoy it, savor it. It's the first of, I think, many years of them heading back to the postseason. So it's like before the Beatles were famous, before your favorite rock band was famous. That's the stage we're still in. Enjoy it. Because it's about to get crazy over here in the next 3-4 years, I believe.
You're catching Peyton Nix and Surtain in the Cavern Club, everybody. Enjoy it while you can. He is Troy Renck. Thanks so much, Troy. Good to talk to Troy Renck and Nate. We have Nate Lundy is back with us, and Nate, we have
I am?
You are.
Oh,
welcome,
hi.
Welcome back. You're studiously typing away.
I
at
can
your,
see myself
at
on
your
the
keyboard on the TV thing.
on the
Yeah.
the TV there.
Right.
The interwebs.
The Monday Night Football slate to wrap up this weekend.
Suck donkey balls.
It's not good. Is that that's a solid reference? I should just let that sit for a minute.
I mean, that's the beauty of being on the interwebs.
Yeah.
You can say things like
I don't know if I think that's actually probably FCC.
it actually
legal.
is okay. It's not one of the
Frowned
seven.
upon.
It's not one of the seven deadly.
Yeah, but it's not going to be great, the anticipation. But you know what? Let's look at the first one, the Bears and the Vikings. Okay, you say that, but the last time the Vikings and the Bears played, the Vikings had to win in overtime to beat the Bears 30-17. Caleb Williams threw for 340 yards and 2 touchdowns. Darnold threw for 330 and 2 touchdowns. But here's the part that was interesting.
Yes.
The Bears focused on limiting Justin Jefferson. That worked. He had 2 catches for 27 yards. The problem, Jordan Addison had 8 for $162, and TJ Hawkinson had 7 for 114. Addison and Jefferson last week, 5 touchdowns between the two of them. And oh, by the way, in case you were curious, Sam Darnold is in the top 10 in yards, in touchdowns, and in the top 3 in passer rating. Sam Darnold's going to get paid, folks. I don't know if it's by the Vikings or somebody else, but he's had himself a year.
That last game was interesting because it was at Soldier Field. That's why. Minnesota's
and
on
the Bears
home.
Scored 17 in the fourth too.
Yeah, Minnesota's on their home track. I'm telling you, both of these games are going to be really well. Actually, the Raiders one could be interesting. I'll get into that in a second. But this first one, like I was so excited. I'm like, man, this is gonna be fun. Get a doubleheader on Monday night, which I think they should be doing every time.
Oh, really? See, I
like it. I like it. I like the doubleheader on Monday nights.
I'm a grouch.
Well, that's fine. You and Vic Lombardi can hang out together and kick people off your lawn. But I think that I'm not overly excited about either of these games from a watchability standpoint. However, I will tell you that I think they're kind of fun to bet on. Sometimes you can find some ways to make this stuff interesting.
And think about this too, because Jordan Addison, you know everything you need to know about Justin Jefferson, right? I mean, Justin Jefferson, by the way, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, teammates at LSU, if they were to be 1-2 in yardage, be the first time college teammates have ever gone 1-2 in league history. But Addison, however, has remember, he's still relatively new. He's played 28 games in his career. He's got 17 touchdowns.
Yeah, he's a machine. And look, part of that is a benefit for him because of the guy that's lining up opposite him, right? I mean, when you've got arguably the best wide receiver in the game in JJ, you've got the ability, if you're Addison, to sit over on the other side and find yourself, facing off with the second corner, things like that, right? The kinds of things that hopefully give you another opportunity. And I think that Sam Darnold's more than aware of that. He recognizes that Justin Jefferson needs to be that big focal point because he is so good. But there's plenty of examples over the course of the history of the NFL when we have seen teammates like this, where you wind up with a second receiver that has a lot of success because of the amount of spotlight that number one wideout takes.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously it's the Bears are the one team in that division that I think they're on the right track, but they're certainly not the juggernauts that Detroit and Minnesota and Green Bay are, all legitimate Super Bowl candidates with the Eagles probably. And they're on their way back. Obviously, changing play callers has helped. Presumably, they'll be looking at a new coach too. But what can the Bears do to make this interesting, if not from winning the game? But you're talking about betting standpoint.
I think from I mean, look, from a betting standpoint, I think there's some player props and there's some things that you could look at. I'll share this with you. I am on team TJ Hawkinson tonight. When it comes to being able to put together a same game parlay. So let me give you this one as just a very simple example for Hawkinson. And look, part of the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing here with TJ is because the Bears they don't give up a lot of touchdowns to the tight end position, but they do give up a lot of yards to the tight end position, north of 60 per game, as a matter of fact, is what they do. So I put this one together, and I did this over at FanDuel earlier today. So I'm taking Minnesota on the money line. Just need them to win. Don't need them to cover. Again, the spread's about 6.5. I don't need them to cover. I just need them to win the game at home, which I think they will do, even with Caleb Williams playing better. And then give me TJ Hawkinson to have at least 3 catches and 40 yards. 3+ receptions.
I love that.
40+ yards.
I'd be stunned if he doesn't hit
That's
that.
all that you need. And if you build that one over at FanDuel, because again, FanDuel gives you the options on the total receptions, right? You're not just sitting because Hawkinson's regular number is at 4.5. And I'm not convinced he doesn't get 5 catches, by the way. But if I can bring that down and I can still put myself in plus odds, I'm going to. So 40 yards by most of the projections, the sims, things like that, they have him closer to 50 to 52 yards receiving. Again, knowing what the Bears defense does against opposing tight ends. Most folks have him projected for in that 4.3 to 4.9 total catches in the game. All I need him to do is pull down 3. He might do that in the first half. And then I just need Minnesota to win. Put that together at FanDuel. That is a plus 118. And then if you want to go back to the guy that Sean was just talking about a second ago, Jordan Addison, and you want to talk about Justin Jefferson as well. Justin Jefferson's total yards over under receiving for tonight is right around 82. I'm not touching that one because I think if they get in control of this game, there is absolutely zero reason for the Vikings to risk their best player. And so I don't know how much he may wind up getting involved. So here's what I did, because BetMGM has a boost for tonight of 25%. So check this out. Jordan Addison, 50 or more yards receiving. Justin Jefferson, 50 or more yards receiving. That's it. Just those two, plus 100. So if you apply that boost, it's plus 125 over at BetMGM. 50, that's it. I mean, Jordan Addison could get 35 of that on one catch.
Sure.
So could Jefferson, for that matter. And so I kind of I'm bringing the numbers. Like I said, Jefferson's number, I think, is at 81 or whatever. I think Addison's is at right around the mid 50s. Mm-hmm. But again, I feel like Addison's going to have himself a nice game. Both of them for 50. Plus 100. You apply that boost at BetMGM. Now all of a sudden you're looking at a plus 125. Beyond that, staying away from a lot of the stuff in that particular contest. I'm not so sure. It might not wind up being an under type of game.
Yeah. So
I'm avoiding a lot of the other things just because I think that may be a little bit more of a challenge. I do think we will see some points though in the second game of the night, as Atlanta and Kirk, I like to throw interceptions. Cousins,
especially at prime time,
will be taking on Vegas. Well, just look at his game log.
Yeah, not good. It's not good.
I think George Bush Sr. was president the last time Cousins threw a touchdown. I mean, it's just he's in this insane funk, and everybody's like, "Oh, you got to bet on him to have a touchdown because eventually the streak's got to end."
I mean,
I know Vegas isn't all that good, but Kirk Cousins has got his head buried in his butt right now. I don't know what the heck is going on with that guy.
Well, all of a sudden, it took a lot of a year.
Forget it. I'll stay away.
The Michael Penix Jr. pick doesn't look as crazy anymore.
Well, so here's the thing. Here's the
challenge. Not that they'll do anything about it when Cousins is healthy, but
here's the challenge that you run into, I think, with Cousins tonight. And I made fun of Brad on the podcast this morning because he used the word, Sean.
Uh-oh.
He used the B word.
Okay.
And he said, the thing he's scared about in tonight's game is that Kirk Cousins will be benched.
I think it's a possibility.
He used the B word, folks, and that is scary when you're talking about betting because of what you would assume could happen. So let me give you an example of something I put together for tonight. It is a 2-leg parlay at plus 112. That is for Kirk Cousins to have at least 200 yards passing and 1 pick. Screw the touchdown. I don't want to play the he's due card with him, which means he may go off against this Vegas defense. But I don't want to play that card because if he throws a pick early, maybe 2, especially with the way he's been playing lately, could you see Penix?
Yeah.
You might, right, Sean? I mean, you could wind up seeing him.
Absolutely. You could.
In which case, my idea of him getting over 200 or even over 225 sucks because he's going to be sitting over on the sideline holding the clipboard and having a little earpiece.
He's having a better primetime year than most. He is 2-1 this year. I mean, that brings him to 14-21 in his career. They beat the Eagles, they beat the Buccaneers, and they lost to the Chiefs. But obviously, the concern is the history in which he's been bad. The 3 primetime games, he has thrown 7 touchdowns. And
he has 15 picks.
Yes. These teams are bad, Nate. The turnover differential for these teams. The Falcons are -9, which you talk about the picks. So give their defense credit for being opportunistic because the Falcons are only -9 on the year. The Raiders are -17, and their quarterback is
in the last 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins has 0 touchdowns and 8 picks.
I'm a little surprised he hasn't gotten benched yet. If he had not had the career he had, it might have happened. But the Raiders at the moment, their touchdown, their quarterback, if it was baseball, that'd be one of those games that TBD. At the moment, the expectation is it will be Desmond Ridder, who started 13 games for the Falcons last year. Aiden O'Connell will try it in warmups. He had suffered a bone bruise, not the knee injury they thought would end his season. But for the Raiders, who, let's face it, are tanking, and I'll just say it flat out, they are tanking for Shedeur Sanders. That's the Raiders' plan. That's Shedeur Sanders' plan. That's the plan. They are probably going to go with Desmond Ridder, I would think, against the Falcons. Ridder, obviously, much like Anthony Richardson, not as good a runner, but the
can Brock Bowers play quarterback?
Just go old school single wing. Just let him wildcat it to pieces.
My husband cannot throw the ball and catch the ball.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen it happen this year.
I mean,
we have.
Well, Richardson did it against the Broncos. The ball came in at the end zone and he caught it. So, I mean, you can throw.
Didn't Josh Allen do it last week?
Yeah, Josh Allen did it. It happens sometimes.
It does happen sometimes.
Tom Brady was slacking. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
But this game, the line jumped, Nate. It was a 5-point favorite for the Falcons, and we're talking about how bad the Falcons have been. And it jumped 1.5 points. It went from -5 to -6.5 today in just the last 48 hours. What causes things like that when you see those late jumps? Obviously, we know that betting comes in on the other side to even it out.
Yeah, but
I wonder if some of that is the O'Connell Ridder situation.
Yeah, some of it is the quarterback situation. Some of it is exactly what you hinted at, which is that the odds makers are obviously watching the money. They're paying attention. They know there are sharps out there, and so as good as they are with their picks and things like that, and how they build the algorithms, especially in the NFL, by the way. But as they start to do those kinds of things, if they suddenly see an intense amount of handle come in on something in particular, then they just, for their own, call it survival, they have to do some adjustments. They have to be smart in how they decide to play the money lines, the spreads, the over-unders, even player props is where we see some, big time movement sometimes with these books. So yeah, what you're seeing usually is, imagine a big old stack of cash, right? So picture it again with the fulcrum,
right.
The scales. Well, somebody comes in and drops a stack of cash, we're tipping things.
Right.
And so the books are trying to adjust to that. We've talked about this before. When they set lines, obviously they're looking for accuracy, but they're also looking for the idea of 50% of the money being on one side and 50% of the money being on the other.
10% of all of it.
Because they're pulling their own rake. And so the idea is if they can balance those scales out, well, if somebody's dropping money, then they've got to figure out how to be able to try to get some money to come in on that other side of the scale so that they can balance everything out. It's a mathematical thing.
Yeah. And so we'll find out with both of these games tonight. Neither of them have any playoff implications for the Broncos. So
it doesn't really affect the Broncos.
Obviously, bets, have a little bit of fun.
Big stuff in the NFC North because remember, every team except the Bears has double-digit wins. And so the NFC North has been a lot of fun. Let me share some stats with you real quick before we sign off here. And I also want to pop in on something with the NHL and the NBA tonight.
Yeah.
Let's start here. The most popular player props, according to our buddy John Ewing over at BetMGM. Jordan Addison to go over 52.5 receiving yards. 99% of the money is on the over. Folks do not have a belief in Chicago getting it going on the ground. The second most bet player prop tonight is the under on DeAndre Swift at 50.5 rushing yards. I think that ties into people thinking there's going to be a negative game script, and therefore Caleb Williams is going to have to throw the ball as opposed to running the ball. Third most popular bet for this evening, and that is Jordan Addison to go over 22.5 on his longest reception. I just told you I like him for the 50 yards plus, and the fact that he can get 20, 25, 30, 35 of those on one catch. Part of why you're seeing this. And then going back to the guy that I was just talking about, TJ Hawkinson, over 42.5 receiving yards. That is one of the other most popular bets for this evening when we're looking at this Monday night doubleheader.
Well, we will look a little bit at the NHL and NBA too. Obviously, the Nuggets are in action tonight.
Nuggets and Avs in action tonight.
The Nuggets will take on Sacramento. They've won their last two. Nuggets at 13-10, Kings at 13-3. Jamal Murray looked good in his last outing. That's exciting to see. We'll see how that continues. Mackenzie Blackwood looked stellar in his Avalanche debut. 37 saves. Did a great job there. The Avs have now won 4 of their last 5. Look out. They travel to Vancouver. Late start tonight. 8:30 p.m. as you see it here in Colorado. Take on the Canucks beginning beginning of a 3-game road trip for the Avalanche.
Yes.
We'll see how that goes along as well, but you're looking at some NBA and NHL options.
Yeah,
So,
looking at a couple of things. Let's start off with the NBA thing with the Nuggets game tonight. No one in the National Basketball Association gives up more I hate saying this, gives up more assists to the opposition than the Denver Nuggets. And right now, Domantas Sabonis over under on his assists is sitting at 5.5.
What?
And if you play the over, it is plus 100.
Well, you keep talking while I get into
so
my computer.
He has
here.
done this. He has hit that 6 mark or better in 2 out of his last 4 games and in 4 out of his last 7. This will be the first matchup between the Kings and the Nuggets this season. So I don't have the ability to look back on a previous matchup between the two of them in terms of Western Conference foes. However, again, Sabonis over 5.5 assists, plus 100 at DraftKings right now. Again, 4 out of the last 7 games he's done it, and nobody gives up more assists to their opponents than the Denver Nuggets. So as you look at that one, that is something that I think you can definitely play. And then talking about the hockey tonight, if you take, there's only 3 games on ice tonight. You got Washington and Dallas, you got Florida and Edmonton, and then you've got the Avs and the Canucks on the late night puck drop at 8:30 Mountain Time, as Sean was talking about. I think we're going to see some scoring. I believe we're going to see scoring in all 3 of these games, by the way, but I'm going to focus in just on the first 2, just in case Mackenzie Blackwood continues to play well between the pipes for the Avs, and maybe they can somehow keep this a low-scoring affair north of the border up in Vancouver. But if you take the first 2 games, so I was talking about Washington and Dallas, as well as Edmonton and Florida, I'm going to put together a parlay of those 2 for each of those teams to score at least 2 goals. This comes back to looking at some goaltending that's been going on. Florida has looked awful lately, folks. If you go back and look at how they've been playing for being the defending Cup champs, they have not been playing well right now. So if we're talking Washington, Dallas, Edmonton, Florida, I need all 4 of those teams to score at least 2 goals, plus 119 over at DraftKings. So let's see if we can light the lamp a few times tonight on the ice.
You talk about Sabonis. I did take a look at that because, it seemed like he's played Denver pretty well. In his last 4 games against the Nuggets, he's had double-doubles in all 4, triple-doubles in 1, but assists alone, he has not had lower than 7, not fewer than 7 assists in any of his last 4 against the Nuggets. He's been averaging 8 against the Nuggets. And so,
and it makes me,
that's a concern.
And
nobody gives up more 3-point attempts than the Nuggets either.
You could look at that one.
The kick-out game is big.
It makes me nervous telling folks to play the over on the 5.5 because it seems so completely out of whack that number should not only be at 5.5, but should be to the point where it is plus odds.
Well, I'll tell him.
So then I get a little worried.
Yeah.
I get a little worried that the bookmakers are playing around a little bit
and we don't.
And they know something. By the way, that parlay I gave you on the ice about each of the teams to score 2 goals, if you believe there will be a high-scoring affair in Vancouver. If you were to say Colorado and Vancouver to also each score at least 2 goals, that turns it into a 3-legger and makes it plus 235.
Oh, well.
So if you think you're going to see some scoring on the ice tonight, but my favorite bet, like I said, I'm hoping that maybe the odds makers don't know something that we don't. Fingers crossed. Is this over on Sabonis for his assist tonight against the Nuggets as they are on the road in Sacktown?
Yeah, and the Nuggets don't care what number of assists he gets as long as they get the win. The Nuggets want to stay in a spot where they're continuing to stay over 500. The Avalanche will
looking to see as that number
as well.
Down.
Nuggets and Avs in action tonight, and of course you have a pair of Monday Night Football games. Congratulations, by the way, to Travis Hunter, the Colorado Buffaloes. Hunter wins the Heisman 30 years precisely after Rashawn Salam wins it, the first and previously only Heisman Trophy Award winner for the Colorado Buffaloes. And
Sabonis' number is now at minus 120. Somebody caught on to what we were talking about.
Oh, that
happens. Stinks. See? That's right. I still might double down. I already bet it this morning at plus odds. But
how about this, Nate? When you talk about what a fun time to be in Colorado sports, we talked a little bit about Nick Bonitto being a dark horse for Defensive Player of the Year. Bo Nix is going to be in the mix. I don't think he'll win it, but I think he'll be in the mix for Rookie of the Year, right? But how about this? For the first time in history, the reigning NBA MVP, the NHL MVP, and the Heisman Trophy winner all play in the same state.
Yes.
Nikola Jokic, Nathan McKinnon, Travis Hunter. It is a tremendous time to be a sports fan, and it's a fun time to do it. So we always like the opportunity to break it down with you. Thanks to Troy Renck of the Denver Post to joining us, and check out that latest Broncos podcast with Troy Renck while you're at it. Obviously, abbreviated week for the Broncos. This was the biggest game. Guess what that means? Thursday's the biggest game. So we'll continue to break that down as the week goes along. Tomorrow, Cody Rourke will join us. We'll dig really into the details in Cody's film room. We'll do that tomorrow. All Broncos digging really deep prior to the big game against the Chargers. Broncos stayed in 6th place in the AFC, jumping over the Chargers. Of course, they have to win in order to hold it. We'll talk about all that and more as the week goes along. Danny Bailey's in the booth making everything work, even nodding when he has to, Nate, so he can make it look better than
it's okay. He's
are.
answering my questions. That's the big
Right.
thing. At least I know he's paying attention.
Teamwork makes the dream work, y'all. And we do it all for you.
Teamwork
Thanks so much. You missed any part. Oh my God, it's even worse. If you missed any part of it, just drag that little red bar. You know how it works. Like, subscribe, the whole thing. We appreciate however you're catching it, whether it's live or it's at your convenience. And that's why we do it the way we do it right here. We'll be back at it tomorrow. For Danny Bailey, for Troy Renck, for Nate Lundy, for everyone at Mile High Sports, I'm Sean Drotar. This is Mile High Sports Today. Thanks for watching.